I'm Dr. Ellen Langer. We often believe that age is something that simply happens to us, that it moves in one direction, marked by birthdays, numbers, and assumptions we quietly accept as truth. But after decades of research at Harvard, I can tell you this with confidence. Aging is not only a biological process, it is also a psychological one. The way you think about your age, the way you relate to time, and the way you engage with the present moment plays a far greater role in how you age than we were ever taught to believe. When we label ourselves as old, we do more than describe a number. We unconsciously change our behavior. We move less, we expect decline, we stop learning, and we begin to outsource responsibility for our vitality. The mind listens carefully to these labels. It follows the instructions we give it. When we expect weakness, we behave in ways that create weakness. When we expect limitation, we unknowingly design our lives around those limits. In my research, I've seen something remarkable. When people are placed in environments that encourage them to think, act, and engage as if they are younger, measurable changes occur. Posture improves, memory sharpens, strength increases. These are not illusions or positive thinking exercises. These are real physiological shifts triggered by a change in mindset. The body responds to the mind's expectations far more quickly than we once believed possible. Aging accelerates when life becomes automatic, when days blur together, when routines replace curiosity, and when attention drifts away from the present moment. Mindlessness makes us older. Mindfulness, on the other hand, keeps us psychologically young. Each time you notice something new, question an assumption, or choose awareness over habit, you interrupt the process of decline. Your mind is not separate from your body. Every belief you hold about what is appropriate for your age shapes how you move, how you heal, and how you live. If you believe growth has an expiration date, your life will reflect that belief. But if you remain open, engaged, and attentive, your body often follows that lead with surprising resilience. The question is not how old you are. The real question is how old you are allowing yourself to be. Are you living based on possibility, or are you living based on expectation? When you stop letting age dictate your identity, you reclaim agency over your experience of time. Age is often presented to us as a fixed destination, a number that quietly defines what we can and cannot do, but this belief deserves to be challenged from the very beginning. The most powerful influence on how old you feel, move, and function is not the calendar. It is the story you repeatedly tell yourself about that number. The moment you accept age as a limitation rather than information, something subtle but profound happens. Your mind begins to narrow your possibilities before your body ever does. This is where aging truly begins, not in the cells, but in the assumptions. Consider how often people say, "I'm too old for this," without any real evidence. That single sentence becomes a command the mind follows with precision, adjusting behavior, energy, posture, and motivation to match the belief. The brain does not distinguish between an external rule and an internal expectation. When you label yourself as old, the mind responds by conserving effort, avoiding challenge, and prioritizing safety over growth. This response once helped humans survive, but in modern life it accelerates decline. The hook is this: many of the changes we associate with aging are not caused by time passing, but by disengagement. When curiosity fades, learning slows. When learning slows, confidence erodes. When confidence erodes, movement, creativity, and resilience quietly retreat. None of this happens because of age itself. It happens because of how age is interpreted. Think about the difference between someone who sees aging as accumulation versus someone who sees it as subtraction. One continues to add skills, perspectives, and experiences. The other begins to remove options from their life. The body responds differently to each mindset. When the mind expects growth, it looks for stimulation. When it expects decline, it prepares for loss. This expectation shapes how we walk into a room, how we approach challenges, and how we recover from setbacks. Even subtle cues, like believing that fatigue is normal for your age, can reduce effort and engagement long before any biological limit is reached. What makes this especially compelling is that mindset operates quietly. You don't feel yourself getting older because you changed a belief. You simply notice one day that you move less, try less, and expect less. That is the danger of treating age as a rule book instead of a reference point. A number becomes an identity, and an identity becomes a self-fulfilling process. The hook here is simple but uncomfortable. Many people age faster not because they are aging, but because they have decided, often unconsciously, to stop participating fully in life. A mindset-based view of age does not deny biology. It refuses to be ruled by it. When you see age as a mindset, you remain psychologically flexible. Flexibility is critical because it allows adjustment rather than surrender. You experiment, adapt, and stay responsive to the present moment. This mental posture keeps neural pathways active and reinforces a sense of agency. Agency is the quiet engine behind vitality. When people believe they still have influence over their capabilities, they behave as if growth is possible, and that behavior matters. The most engaging insight is this: youthfulness is not about pretending you are younger, but about refusing to close mental doors prematurely. Each time you choose curiosity over assumption, you interrupt the aging script. Each time you engage fully instead of withdrawing, you send the brain a message that life still requires attention and participation. The mind rewards this with alertness, energy, and motivation. These qualities then spill over into the body. Age as a mindset means understanding that numbers describe time lived, not potential remaining. When you stop letting age dictate what is appropriate, realistic, or allowed, you reclaim psychological space. In that space, growth continues. The most important shift is not thinking younger, but thinking actively. Because the moment you stop letting age make decisions for you, you begin to experience something remarkable. Aging no longer feels like a decline, but like a process you are consciously shaping every day. Most people assume that aging is driven by time alone, but what truly accelerates aging is not the passing of years, it is the passing of attention. The mind ages fastest when life becomes automatic, when days repeat without awareness, and when experiences blur into habit. This is where mindlessness quietly takes over. You may not notice it happening, but the moment you stop paying attention, your mind stops updating itself. The hook is this: when the mind stops updating, it begins to recycle old patterns, and recycled patterns create the feeling of being older than you are. Consider how quickly routines form. The same route to work, the same conversations, the same assumptions about people and situations. Familiarity feels efficient, but it comes at a cost. The brain thrives on novelty and distinction. When nothing feels new, the mind reduces effort, and reduced effort slowly reshapes how you think, move, and respond. Over time, this lack of engagement manifests physically. Reaction time slows, memory feels less sharp, energy feels inconsistent. These changes are often blamed on age, but they are frequently the result of inattentive living. Mindfulness is not about meditation alone. It is about active noticing. The hook lies in understanding that noticing is an action. Each time you observe something new, you stimulate neural activity. Each time you question an assumption, you create cognitive flexibility. That flexibility is the opposite of aging. When people remain mentally flexible, they adapt better, recover faster, and feel more alive. The body mirrors this flexibility through posture, coordination, and resilience. When life is lived mindlessly, expectations solidify. You begin to assume that today will feel like yesterday, and tomorrow will feel the same. This assumption drains vitality. The brain responds by conserving energy, which feels like fatigue, boredom, or mental fog. But when you live mindfully, even ordinary moments become stimulating. The brain cannot afford to shut down when it is actively engaged with the present. Engagement keeps internal systems alert, responsive, and alive. One of the most overlooked hooks is this: boredom is not caused by lack of stimulation, but by lack of attention. Two people can be in the same environment, one feeling drained and the other feeling energized. The difference is not age, ability, or circumstance, it is awareness. Mindfulness transforms the same moment into a different experience. That transformation has biological consequences. Alertness influences circulation, breathing, and muscular tone. When attention sharpens, the body subtly prepares for action. Another powerful effect of mindfulness is how it changes your relationship with effort. Mindless living encourages shortcuts and avoidance. Mindful living invites participation. When you actively engage, you use more of yourself. Using more of yourself keeps systems functioning. This is why people who remain curious often appear younger than those who rely heavily on routine, regardless of chronological age. Curiosity signals to the brain that growth is still expected. When you realize that mindfulness disrupts negative age-based expectations, instead of assuming decline, you remain open to possibility. Instead of labeling experiences as too much or no longer for me, you explore them with interest. This openness reduces fear, and fear is one of the fastest accelerators of aging. Fear tightens the body, restricts movement, and narrows perception. Awareness loosens these patterns. Living mindfully also restores a sense of time richness. When attention is present, moments feel fuller, days feel longer, not shorter. This subjective expansion of time creates the feeling of having more life, not less. When time feels abundant, urgency decreases and enjoyment increases. The mind associates this state with vitality rather than decline. The most compelling truth is that mindfulness does not slow aging by stopping time, but by changing how you experience it. When you are fully present, you are less trapped by past expectations and future fears. The mind stays young because it remains engaged with what is happening now. And when the mind stays engaged, aging no longer feels like a loss of function, but like a continued relationship with life that remains dynamic, responsive, and deeply alive. The most underestimated force shaping the human body is expectation. Long before biology makes a decision, the mind has already sent instructions about what is likely, what is possible, and what should be avoided. These expectations operate quietly, but they are powerful. The hook is this: your body is constantly listening, adjusting its responses based on what your mind anticipates. When strength is expected, systems activate to support it. When decline is expected, the body prepares for reduction. Aging, in many cases, is guided less by time and more by the signals the mind repeatedly sends. From an early age, we are taught what aging is supposed to look like: slower movement, weaker memory, less adaptability. These ideas become mental shortcuts that the brain uses to interpret normal fluctuations in energy or focus. A moment of fatigue becomes proof of decline. A lapse in memory becomes confirmation of getting older. The hook here is that interpretation shapes outcome. When the mind labels an experience as inevitable loss, effort decreases. And when effort decreases, performance follows. This creates a loop that feels biological, but is often psychological in origin. Expectations influence behavior first, and behavior reshapes physiology. When people believe their bodies are fragile, they move cautiously. When movement becomes cautious, muscles weaken and balance declines. When balance declines, confidence drops. This chain reaction can unfold without a single medical event. It begins with belief. The body is not resisting the mind, it is cooperating with it. This cooperation is efficient, but it can work against you when expectations are limiting. One of the most compelling hooks is that positive expectations do not require denial of reality. They require openness to variability. The human body is not static. It responds differently depending on context, attention, and belief. When people expect improvement, they are more likely to engage, persist, and experiment. Engagement increases circulation, persistence strengthens neural connections, and experimentation keeps systems adaptive. These are biological processes, but they are activated by psychological permission. Another overlooked dimension is how expectations affect recovery. People who expect to heal tend to notice small improvements. Noticing improvement reinforces effort. Effort accelerates recovery. Those who expect decline often overlook progress and focus on discomfort. Attention to discomfort amplifies it. The hook here is subtle but profound. What you look for determines what you experience more of. The brain prioritizes what aligns with expectation. Expectations also shape how the body handles stress. When stress is interpreted as harmful and overwhelming, physiological responses intensify. Muscles tighten, breathing shortens, and energy depletes. When stress is interpreted as manageable or temporary, the same physiological arousal can be experienced as motivation or focus. Over time, these interpretations affect cardiovascular health, immune response, and overall resilience. Aging is accelerated not by stress alone, but by how stress is mentally framed. Belief in capability changes posture, tone of voice, and facial expression. These signals feed back into the nervous system, reinforcing the original expectation. This loop explains why confidence often looks like vitality. It is not cosmetic, it is functional. When the body receives consistent messages of competence and readiness, it organizes itself accordingly. This organization influences coordination, reaction time, and endurance. Recognizing that expectations are not fixed, they are learned, reinforced, and therefore changeable. Each time you question an age-based assumption, you disrupt an automatic instruction. Each time you act as if growth is still possible, you provide new data to the brain. The body updates its responses based on this data. Aging then becomes less about managing loss and more about negotiating possibility. When expectations shift, biology often follows, not because the body is fooled, but because it is responding to a new set of signals that invite strength, adaptability, and continued engagement with life. So, as you move forward, I invite you to consider this. Treat age as information, not instruction. Stay curious, stay present, stay engaged, because the mind does not simply observe aging, it actively participates in creating it. And when you change how you think, you may discover that time itself begins to respond differently.